What's good? So to go super in depth about my previous video on stamina management regarding the tempo and erratic movement theory, I've decided to put together a tempo movement chart for you guys to better understand exactly what to do. The last video is closer to a demonstration, not exactly a tutorial. So this video I'll showcase the chart I made and elaborate what to do. So here's the tempo movement chart. So to take in everything one thing at a time so it doesn't seem too much at first, at the top we have our abilities listed that are protected in any way, shape, or form, which is basically all of the abilities except for Midnight Stinger, which is an unsafe ability. You've got the icons, the name, and even what type of protection they offer at each one. And just below them, I have put down the cooldown timers of each ability for reference, including the cooldown timers that include, let's say, a frontal or an SA. Now with Dark Flame, it's actually two different abilities that act as a two-parter. The first part of Dark Flame is a frontal every 6 seconds. The last part of Dark Flame, which is Ultimate Dark Flame, is a frontal every 15 seconds. Now we get into the ability sequence. Now let's start from the left side. Here it starts with Night Crow, aka iframe, into Crow Flare, which then splits into 3 different segments. Now, this is just an example of the start of your tempo movement. You could technically start with Crow Flare, then into iframe, but once you get more familiar with tempo movement, you can kind of change things to your liking eventually. So these 3 segments represent 3 main different ways to do tempo movement, and at the end of each one, it can loop back at the start with the iframe into Crow Flare perfectly and repeat itself. One big thing to note, why I put down full or half on each Dark Flames, was to represent what type of Dark Flame you are doing. Let me show you what I mean. Here I have both Prime and Ultimate Dark Flame on my cooldown list here to see their timers. They both act as the same ability but split into 2 separate frontal guards with different timers. A full Dark Flame will use both frontals, and a full frontal animation like this, now you can see both timers I was talking about. And to do the half Dark Flame, or rather the first part, it's gonna look like this. Now this is still good enough to stall a small frontal or using it to bait out opponents sometimes, but this is what only using the first half of Dark Flame looks like. So going back to the tempo chart, here's a few things to mention. One big thing is for these movements to work, you have to linger in any frontal or super armor they have. Otherwise, you'll mess up the timing and loop I've designed. The idea of tempo movement is preserving stamina by lingering in frontal and SA to stay protected. And before I demonstrate myself what these movements will look like, if you're wondering if any newer bombs would help out in this, Hellfire is a great choice to add in since it's a frontal animation. So once again, by the time you've learned these types of movements, you'll start to add in more stuff you think will be beneficial. Alright, now I'll show you what each of these segments look like and how you're supposed to linger in each ability properly. I'll start by doing the top segment. Then I'll go ahead and do the middle segment. Then the bottom segment. So essentially, as long as you follow the chart, each ability at a time, while making sure to linger just like I have, you'll perfectly master the idea of defensive tempo movement while preserving your stamina. Now let's get onto the erratic movement chart. Pretty much designed the same, except it's just one movement chain loop I've put. The movement chain is a good start and main way to apply erratic movement. You see, you've probably noticed by now that both types of movements use the exact same ingredients of abilities, but used in different ways, styles, orders, or even timing. That's because they actually both move the same. One is just much faster than the other and one lingers without the other. So you can essentially do both without having to follow a movement chain and just rely on your cooldowns and come up with movements of your own on the spot. With these kinds of movements, you'll be spamming your abilities a lot more while keeping an eye on cooldown timers. There's a lot more to do with erratic movement, not including Hellfire thrown in, but this is a good start for you guys. And once you get familiar with how it's done, you'll start to freestyle your own combinations of movements eventually. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate this movement loop for you guys. So that's how you guys perform the erratic movement for the most part. It's pretty much mimics what tempo does, just erratically. As I mentioned in my previous video, this kind of movement is key when you just need to move around, period. Certain matchups that punish you for playing behind your frontal or staying too still at times. This movement helps you to get up and move. Classes like Ninja, Warrior, even other Sorcs will challenge your positioning and you'll need to constantly move in order to decrease your chance at getting caught. Although this kind of movement may not be 100% safe, it's a lot safer than getting grabbed in frontals or getting punished for staying too still. Moving erratically around your opponent gives you a lot more opportunities to play against hard matchups that counter you to a degree. And of course, the hybrid of the two is exactly a fusion of both. Once you've learned tempo, then you can learn erratic. Once you've learned both, you can then get an idea of what a hybrid movement would look like. And the great thing about both of these movements is they are designed to keep your stamina at above 70, so you have plenty to spare in use if needed. Stamina management is pretty key, also hard, but it's possible on Succession Sorc nevertheless. So with that being said, hopefully that explains those two types of movements, with this video going into detail of what abilities to do and the previous one showcasing it in actual PvP. And I hope you guys found this video helpful, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!